100% of their £1,000 deposit on demand, the bank is perfectly entitled to, by law, to lend £900 of that, say, even if the depositor, were he to know about it, were to object. So the £900 that was fraudulently lent out would, of course, be in perfectly safe instruments like government bonds and mortgages and the like. There's no worry, you know. What if there's insufficient cash to satisfy depositors with this arrangement? Well, the friendly central bank is there, and they will give a cash advance against any eligible assets. This is the sale and repurchase order, which I'm sure some of you might be familiar with. And the natural determination of the temporal arrangement of monetary resources is usurped. Okay? Now, borrowing short to lend long is one particular aspect of this phenomenon. And is everybody familiar with what borrowing short to lend long means? Good. It's only one aspect. You know, if you lend 3-month money for 3 months and a day with the expectation that a roll is possible after 3 months, it's topologically the same as lending out demand deposits. At some point, the system will be unexpectedly caught short. Now, it might seem that everything always matches from an assets and liabilities perspective across the whole financial system, and that there are no holes. So obviously, when you pick up a bank's balance sheet and you look at the assets and liabilities, there is no way that they will not match. Otherwise, they would not have been signed off by an accountant. They will always match. But what you have to remember is that the balance sheet at any one moment is a representation of a spatial arrangement of entities. The wholes are in time from the mismatching of durations. So mismatching of durations means you walk into a bank, you want to lend the money out for at most 3 months, and the bank goes and lends it out for 10 years, in the hope that over that 10-year period, they will be consistently able to roll that 3-month loan and have continuous funding. Okay? So they're looking at the wrong thing. Now, obviously, it's very hard to look the holes in time, as it were, which is why these things have to be determined subjectively from the start. Okay? Then there will be no question. Okay? They will match. So an approximate match between assets and liabilities on a bank's balance sheet is untenable. So is an approximate matching of their durations. Okay? It's incorrect fiscal rectitude, plain and simple, has nothing to do with the gold standard. If we were on a salt standard or a cowrie shell standard, this point would still be valid. Okay? Nothing to do with the gold standard per se. So it's the mechanics of this process, this usurpation, that results in the business cycle, which is not a natural consequence of anything, no matter what you read. The business cycle is not a natural anything. It shouldn't happen. It's a consequence of bad fiscal discipline. So this is all unnecessary under a collectively determined subjective arrangement of monetary resources. And there is no better way to show that temporal holes can be just as damaging as balance sheet holes than with the great financial crisis. Okay? Now, a lot of people have said, you know, we should have let it go, we should have let the system collapse and just sort of have a cathartic event, and, you know, then we can go back to first principles. And it sounds like a good idea, you might say, and I'm sure many people here might have that point of view. And I did until I really started to think about it, okay? The usurpation of that natural determination of the deposit structure has no better example than, let's say, the Royal Bank of Scotland in London. Simply put, the difference between a pound coin in your pocket and a £1 deposit at the Royal Bank would have been gargantuan. if the system were allowed to collapse. Okay? The latter would have been written down 95%, whereas the former would still be in your pocket. And anyone that associates inflation with some kind of linear QTM type thing is wrong. They say there's so many dollars being created and prices go up because of these dollars being created. Well, you would have got back 90 years of purchasing power of the dollar in a flash at the expense of the maintenance of civilization for those who had the dollar in their pocket, as it were, not on deposit. And the prices of all things would have collapsed for reasons for nothing to do with demand falling. You know, that's just the wake and the jet plane crashing, you know. So trying to fix the wake is not going to make the jet plane come out of the ground from flames. And that, by the way, is the tactic of most central banks, is to increase demand. The general price level would plunge not because of a twee reduction in demand, but because everyone is trying to sell assets into a vanishing bid to make up for the shortfall. Okay? Trying to sell something into a vanishing bid might prove very troublesome to the person. So this is a very, very powerful mechanism, okay? And you can paper over it, as we're trying to do now, but it's a very, very powerful force. And the consequence of that is a deflationary environment. You know, it's not an inflationary environment. So, you know, they are doing all that they can to keep the charade going, and it seems to be working for the moment. So what we just experienced in GFC, Great Financial Crisis, as tick follows talk, will be experienced yet again, but it will be exponentially worse. So mismatching of durations is still going on. You know, if you look at the yield curve at the moment, it has never been so profitable for a bank to take out overnight money and lend it out for any term longer than overnight. It's called the 210 spread in Bloomberg broker parlance, and it's never been higher. So, and this is a point the professor has made, there is no risk of them not being able to find overnight funding now in this regime. No risk whatsoever. Why? Because who's stepping in there to buy treasuries and bills, you know, at the drop of a hat? Our friends at the Fed, you know. So there is no risk currently at the moment of a repeat of the GFC quite yet. But obviously that situation with the Fed is not going to last forever. It will end at some point. When, I can't predict the future, I don't think anyone can, you know, you just know it will happen. So I think that's it for the moment. I've covered most of the points. We've debunked the myth that there is insufficient gold for economic activity. We have debunked the myth that gold fixes the price level. We've debunked the myth of the origin of the banknote via the failure, via the ineptitude supposedly of the goldsmith. And we have also shown that what people assume is a facet of a gold standard, as in crises, has nothing to do with a gold standard per se. So that's it for the moment, and I invite any questions on the back of that. I've got a bit more to say about how this relates to the situation in the futures market with gold and silver. Gold and silver were money, or let's just say gold, and gold commanded an interest rate. And just because Mr. Nixon said in 1971 that the dollar is now irredeemable does not mean that gold no longer commanded an interest rate. They decided to change its nomenclature to lease rate to make it sound like gold was no longer money, you know, like an industrial commodity somehow. But it's still well and truly there, earning interest for people. But the corollary of not being on a gold standard is that you have a futures market as well. And I'm not sure of the time. Have I got enough time at the moment? Anyone will watch?
3:30.
3:30.
Yeah, pretty well.
Okay. So I will talk about this now then. Now, this is related to basis, co-basis that we were discussing yesterday. Now, I said that in the current regime, well, in any regime, you have the job, you have the concept of a warehouseman. So a warehouseman is someone who warehouses a particular commodity. He buys this commodity and he sells it at the futures price. Sells a future, let's say for 3 months delivery, and he warehouses this good. So let's say he buys gold and he sells a 3-month future. Now, he was paid a consideration for that. It's not really relevant what the consideration was here, but just call it, let's say, for $5. And that isn't the end of the story, though, because he is sitting on this gold, and he doesn't actually need it until he needs to cough it up at the futures exchange in 3 months' time. So, what does he do? He goes to the leasing market, it's called. And he says, well, obviously if I trust the person I'm lending the gold to, that's a given, and obviously I get some kind of consideration for that. It's obviously better than just leaving the gold sitting in the warehouse, because you're getting an extra marginal return. Okay, so he goes to the leasing market, and if he is legit, he will lease for less than 3 months. Why does he have to lease it for less than 3 months if he's legitimate?
Because he has to produce it for 3 months.
Yeah. Okay, he has to produce it in 3 months. Okay. So if he's illegit, lease is greater than or equal to 3 months. Okay. And is that wrong? Well, obviously it's wrong. I called it illegitimate. Okay, but that's wrong. Okay, and you can see that this is a kind of symmetrical analogy to borrow long and sell short.
The other way around.
Sorry, borrow short to sell long.
It's quite legitimate to borrow long and sell.
Yes, it's just not usually very profitable. But okay, so we can see that there's a symmetry here. Okay, but it's slightly more subtle than that. Okay, because if you look at the futures exchange as represented by COMEX, 98% of contracts roll. They roll. Okay?
No delivery
No delivery. No
is
delivery.
demanded,
Hmm.
because the speculators are there
Hmm.
for the ride.
Hmm. Speculators there for that.
They don't want the gold. They
Not only that, Professor, sometimes the statutes in these funds say they're not allowed to own keep physical gold.
Oh, even that.
You know, they have to keep gold futures. So they have to keep on rolling. And you can just see that the symmetrical analogy there with a constant roll is equivalent to the Fed being in the market as a constant buyer of bills and bonds. So this illegitimacy can actually remain for an exceptionally long period of time, okay? Until, and second of all, you can see that even in a legitimate futures market, if he's lent out his gold for less than 3 months, and someone does an audit of the, not an audit, if someone just looks at the warehouse, they will see, well, this chap is short a 3-month future and there's no bloody gold in his warehouse.
It's illegit.
Okay, he's not taking into account that it's been leased legitimately for less than 2 months. And this class of error and mistake is the Ted Butler class of error and mistake. It's and others, okay? They make this assumption that the number of futures somehow has to match with the amount of gold in the warehouse, or silver. And it doesn't, you know. Just like if you go into a bank and say, where's my cash? And they say, well, you lent it out for 3 years, you know, it's not going to be here. It'll be here in 3 years' time, you know. So that puts a hole in all of their arguments, that they're not looking at the situation properly, okay? But obviously, this situation is not sustainable forever. Now, I cannot divine how that will change in the future, whether it goes from 98% rolling, 97, 96, 95, I can't predict that, you know, that's up to the people. This, I certainly have no idea about, you know, one can only imagine what they're doing. I mean, if you're stupid enough to believe that this is going to continue into perpetuity, they might have lent it out for 10 years, you know, or something like that.
And they forget about the eroding basis.
They forget about the eroding basis, okay? And the eroding basis is the equivalent of a spike in LIBOR rates, as it were. A move towards backwardation is like saying, hey, you've been messing up here, you know, you haven't been arranging the physical gold against your futures properly, okay? So the futures exchange will say, you know, you can have your gold, okay? If you want delivery against your future, and you want gold, not gold, let's talk about silver. You want silver, you can have your silver. That is no problem. You'll have to wait 1 day longer than usual. Then they'll say, maybe 5 days. We're sorry, there are some logistical problems, you know, and we can't get the silver to you immediately, but it will be there in 5 days. I said it would be there on the 29th. We have to wait till the 3rd, I'm afraid, or the next month. Sorry. And then it might be 10 days. Real big logistical problems, you know. Can't get the insurance to ship the silver, there'll be all kinds of excuses. And then it gets fuzzy, you know, 20 days, and then this is the question mark between delay versus default. And again, I suppose that's splitting hairs, you know. If I had to wait 5 days more than I contracted an obligation, that's a default to me, you know, not a delay. So I have a feeling this will take years. Okay, it's not going to happen overnight. This will take years to evidence itself, obviously.
Sandeep, can you put the paper a bit more in the middle?
So, what?
Yeah, great.
Okay. Now, I think that this will take a very long time to evolve. Okay. Basically, the expectation of this occurring happens by a positive co-basis, okay, which is a backwardation. It means that they can't get that silver or gold that was lent out high enough, that was lent out for a very long period of time. So they need to induce, the market naturally induces people to say, hey, look, come, sell your physical gold, sell your physical silver, and swap it for a future, bring the bid back into the futures market, you know, and have risk-free money, risk-free inverted commas, risk-free up to this extending to infinity, risk-free money, and your
A premium on cash delivery
versus the future.
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, you have the right to demand delivery.
Yes.
But they bribe you with a premium.
Yes.
Add a few more days.
Exactly.
Add a few more months.
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly. Okay, so every time that the market has gone into a backwardation, and backwardation is not the same as no contango. Okay, backwardation is not the same as no contango. So when silver only went into backwardation, when was it, Keith? It was about
A couple of weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Yeah, as an actionable backwardation, positive co-basis, 2 weeks ago. And it disappeared last night when we were doing our calculations. So someone has taken it. Someone has said, I'm willing to sell my spot silver for a premium and replace it with a futures contract. They don't know any better, you know. They're certainly not of the same class of, they're certainly not of the same class of knowledge as the people sitting in this room, you know. And, you know, when the price of silver has advanced so quickly, so shortly, there will naturally be people who are selling anyway. They're not selling it to replace it with a future, they're just selling it to take a profit, which is effectively the same thing as being bribed to take a spot silver future swap. Okay? So, this is my personal feeling that this will take years to resolve. You know, it's not going to, I mean, we've already had, since end of 2008 to current, you know, that's near over 1.5 years, you know, something like that, of backwardation appearing and then going away. You know, backwardation appearing, then going away. So the market is not yet...
So in other words, it's not permanent backwardation until that runs its course.
Yes.
And
yeah. It's not taken.
yeah. But you are not denying that there will be a time.
No, of course. Just like, you know, it would be pretty hard to deny that something like the Great Financial Crisis would eventually happen, you know. Now, whether you said it was going to happen in 06 or 07 or 08 is irrelevant to the actual magnitude of what actually happened. So the gold market and the silver market will behave in exactly the same way. And just like the first clue to the collapse of the GFC was a widening spread in all of this rubbish CDS. It went from having a 0.1% spread to a 5% spread. And this was in the middle of end of 2006, beginning of 2007. That was your first clue. Okay. And lo and behold, it was a brilliant clue.
Say what CDS.
Credit default swap. I actually meant collateralized debt obligation, not credit default swap. CDOs. So all of this packaged rubbish etc., which had had a very, very narrow spread. Suddenly, what happened? The market makers in these things started to step back.
But it's not well reported.
Not well reported.
Just like the premium on cash delivery is not well reported.
Not well.
In fact, it's buried, and the financial journalists are guilty of that.
They are.
Because they're playing into the hands of.
They are.
By the way, just looking at the basis for today, gold is seeing a rising basis, falling gold basis. So it's moving more towards contango. Silver is seeing opposite, at least for April and March and May.
Right.
That the basis is falling and the gold basis is rising.
There are no backwardate, no positive.
No, well, not March, May, and December.
Okay.
December didn't really move. March and May, gold basis is rising.
And the price is up or down?
I think silver was up a little bit. Hold on a second, I just go to the screen. Gold is 14.27, so it's down, and silver is 35.87.
There you go.
Everything's falling quite rapidly at the moment.
So Keith noticed yesterday that it had come out of the backwardation.
Yes.
So we were expecting this partially, not over yet maybe, but that's theory and practice for you there, folks. So short-term trading theory and practice as well.
Well, as you may have noticed, we, without a break, gone on into the question-answer period, so might as well continue, and if you want your coffee, you can have it after, but there will be no
I think,
separate
Sure.
answer, question-answer period. So please, questions, comments.
If nobody else has a question, I've got two comments. One is a small one. You said the balance sheet right then and there doesn't show the temporal, but it all depends how you look at it. If you look at market value of your long-term obligations, it does show it. Because, you see what I mean? If you're marking to market. But if you're looking at the face value of those bonds or maturing value, then those numbers match. So you're marking to market.
No, what I mean is that in the sense that if you pick up Royal Bank's balance sheet, it will say assets, liabilities. The assets, the liability will just be deposit. Okay, you don't know what duration deposit. The asset will be whatever it is, and that has to match in the sense of the dollar value has to match, or pound value has to match here. But there is no way of picking out the actual duration of that part.
Well, if it's an asset, it's a bond.
Yeah, okay, so on the asset side you do, in the sense that you know the bond.
That's all I'm saying, and there's been a lot of controversy about marking to market,
Yeah.
or myth, or marking to, the face value that will come out in 20, 30 years when it matures.
But this part is fully unknown.
Absolutely.
Fully unknown.
The other comment was, your second thought was that this coin in your pocket is worth so much, and what's deposited would get chopped down. To me, this is because it's all, what's in there is conflated,
Yeah.
and the government came along and said, we're guaranteeing all deposits. And now they're getting swamped because of it.
Yeah.
Now, if they would only guarantee those deposits that are legitimate people putting their, their demand deposits in, and not all the other stuff, that would make a big difference.
It would make a big difference.
I'm asking you this.
The thing is though that I remember when current accounts cost you money, you didn't get no matter what the short-term interest rate was, current accounts were zero. You had to pay £12 a month or something to keep one. Now, demand deposits bear interest, so how can a demand deposit bear interest? It can't really, because it's contradicting the fact that it's a demand deposit. But sure, if the bank was doing it properly, just keeping demand money, because what they say is on demand isn't even on demand. You know, it's lent out overnight.
I understand. What I'm saying is the government, the central bank, the treasury, whoever guarantees the system
Yeah.
does not guarantee the system. Only that part which is demand deposit. Like the FDIC, guarantees up to 50 or 100,000 in the US, so that the small deposit is protected.
Yeah, but then
Couldn't you do that? I'm sorry. Couldn't you do that just to protect those people who expect to get their money back versus the huge, CDAs?
yeah, you could,
That's what I'm saying.
but then you're not. If you say that, you're still not. You're still guaranteeing a time deposit, because that demand deposit is still actually a time deposit. You just don't realise.
So you're saying they can't
They can't.
cut this and re-establish the difference.
I don't think.
I'll
So.
think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question. Would you criticize me, or would you contradict me if I said the basis is the price of warehousing?
No, I agree.
You
Yeah.
listen. Is there a similar way of describing the coal basis?
It's the price of de-warehousing.
All right, unwinding
Yeah.
a warehouse
Yeah.
position,
Yeah.
which is also
Yeah.
not cost-free. This
Not
is-
cost-free.
And the cost is the, so I thought this was a good way of looking at the basis, and it doesn't describe the whole thing, but it's a good starting point if you want to conceptualize the basis. That's what you pay when you take something into your warehouse and trade it. But the thing is sitting in the warehouse because you have an extension of the market, the futures market, or the option market where you can trade it. So there is a cost involved, and the warehouseman has to buy the building and put in secure vaults, and the security guards hire them, and insurance. So he will charge. Now, he can recover his expenses through the basis. And then, who is the person who will pocket the coal basis? The fellow who withdraws from the warehouse?
It will be the warehouseman himself.
Oh, himself?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. That's right. Sometimes it will be to his advantage to empty the
Yeah.
warehouse.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But only if he will be able to recover the costs, capital costs, and maintenance costs, and overhead, what have you, in some other ways.
Yeah. Because he'll be out of a job if he can't carry anything in the future.
That's
It'll
right.
be one big payoff for him, and then out of business, you know.
So he empties his warehouse. This is interesting, because a lot of people think that it's always, the warehouse has to be full, otherwise it makes no sense. Sorry, sometimes you empty your warehouse, because there is a better opportunity elsewhere. And that's where the coal is. And this is what is a completely ignored field. There are lots of manuals on futures trading and these elevators, grain elevators, and so on. And they go into minute details, to the nitty-gritty of how to trade, and they are very good on that. But I have never seen that idea that sometimes the grain elevator operator finds it to your advantage to empty the elevator.
Let go of it fully. Yeah.
You know, people think this is not possible. It's very much possible. Well, of course, in a way, it's not characteristic for the grain trade. But when it comes to trading metals, especially monetary metals, it's absolutely important to consider this. And I want to commend, I think I have said this to you, but I say it again, I want to commend Sandeep for discovering this very basic element of the theory. And I hope you will be successful. You know, Sandeep runs a service, and I think the software or the program, you cooperate, the two of you.
Yes, yes.
And it will be tried in actual trading.
Actual trading, yes, will be one of the instruments used.
So we are anxiously waiting for the results, and hopefully next time when we meet, then you will be able to tell us.
Absolutely.
So I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So please help yourself to your coffee.